Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of this show. And, we are entering into another halftime show, which Paul and I love getting to do. I, of course, don't want to speak for Paul. So, Paul, do you love getting to do this?
I love it. I love it. I
Okay.
mean,
All
this
right.
was a little bit different season because I got to chime in on one of the episodes, but usually this is my only time to kind of chime in and talk. But yeah, man, I love these check-ins here.
Yeah, so we love doing this because we get to just kind of reminisce about the great half of a season that we were just able to have. I'm Phil Dark. For those of you, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. And we are your hosts. We get to usually just interview amazing people, which this season has been no exception. And then every so often we just get together and talk about what we talked about, and to be able to just talk about a few other things as well. And today is actually, we are recording this the week that we're releasing it, which isn't the typical way we do these things, but we are this week. And just yesterday was the final day of the Premier League. And normally we don't talk about just the world of soccer per se in this podcast. We talk about what soccer is teaching us about life and leadership. But I gotta bring that up yesterday because it was just an amazing finish. And you were saying you got to kind of follow it via text at the soccer field because you were with one of your sons, watching some soccer. But what'd you get from the text world of that just wild ride we got to be a part of yesterday?
Well, to put it in perspective, I mean, I think you need to know that the text messages were coming from my nephew, who is a Liverpool fan. So it
Yeah,
was coming from
yeah.
a Liverpool perspective, but just crazy the back and forth. And everybody's talking about the top of the table, which we always
Mm-hmm.
do. But I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of conversation about the bottom of the table was
Mm-hmm.
almost just as crazy
Yep.
as the top. But what a wild ride! And I think, as we were saying before we started recording, man, that's why we love this game. It's just it's unpredictable. You never know. And I personally think that I wish every season ended that dramatically. It just keeps
Yeah.
it so interesting all the way to the end of it. There's been seasons where you've had the leader who he clinched weeks ahead of time or whatever, but this is, I think, a lot more fun as it comes down to the wire.
Yeah, I mean, it literally went down to the last 15 minutes of the season. I
Yeah.
mean, I think at the last 10 minutes of both the games, it was tied. And so it was effectively 0-0 going into the last 10 minutes. So that the title race came down to that. The relegation battle came down to the last 10-15 minutes. One goal could have switched everything up until the last 10-15 minutes of the season, which is unbelievable. I mean, and even going to the
Yeah.
Europa, I say that only because Manchester United backed into the Europa League, which is, I
Hmm.
mean, if that's not a testament to where they are right now, I don't know what would be. But the fact that West Ham had to lose to Brighton, I haven't been a Brighton supporter forever, and was yesterday for a bit, and then the Champions League spot as well. I mean, Tottenham had to beat Norwich. I mean, which Norwich was already long gone into the championship, but to have literally every spot was at stake yesterday, which I don't remember a season that has been that way with the Premier
No, there
League.
was there was a lot on the line. I think it was even really interesting the weekend prior,
Mm-hmm.
as things were kind of building up to, hey, what is the last weekend going to look like? I got to watch, some of those matches, but that was even an interesting weekend too because it really set up such a dramatic. Those results were so important because it set up such a dramatic last day
Yeah.
for the league and for all the different leagues and all the circumstances and everything that falls into place and the amount of money that probably went back and forth. I'm not talking about the
Mm-hmm.
betting side of it because I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a lot of money exchanged hands for the betting side, but just within the promotion relegation side
Yes.
of finances for leagues and players contracts. And I mean, I think people forget the the domino effect that those results actually have for people's lives. Front
Yes.
office staff,
Yep.
players, players within teams and organizations, and stadium buildings and things like that. I mean, I just came back from a trip and talking to some of the folks there. They get promoted from a second division to a first division. There's stadium requirements and all these things that people
Mm-hmm.
don't even think about. But just it's I love thinking through those processes of like, okay, it's not just about the teams that stayed up and the teams that went down, but all the different pieces that have to fall into place after that happens.
Yeah.
That I'm sure today and this week is a crazy week of work in all of the clubs.
Yeah, absolutely. And the transfers that were going to happen, like if Leeds got, relegated, then would Calvin Phillips have gone to a different team? Maybe he still will, but like that, that changes. And
Yeah.
I was talking to my son about it, just the most lucrative game in all of global football is coming up this weekend with the championship, playoff final.
Mm-hmm.
But that game that you just watched yesterday, or the Leeds and the Burnley, and that those were just as, not just as, but pretty close as far as the amount of money, like you were talking about, that they just staying up. And then, every place, that's what I love about the Premier League. Every place you get $2.2 million more for finishing that one place ahead. So I think Leicester jumped 3 teams by winning yesterday. So that's $6 million right there. They just made, so that's
easy
what's
money.
so great.
Easy money.
That's what's so great. Exactly. Well, Leicester likes to make money in the Premier League. That's what they've been doing the last decade or so. But I love the story about that. I don't know if you heard that story about the Leicester fan that every year he put, I think it was $50 or $500. I think it was $50. He put down on Leicester every year just to win the Premier League. The one year he did not, because he was traveling, was the year they won it. He would have made at 5,000 to 1. He would have made, over $100,000 on that one bet, but he didn't put it down that. Could you imagine? I just couldn't even imagine that. But anyway, what does that teach about life and leadership? Well, I don't know. Don't gamble. So that's not what we're saying, because I don't want people to take that from that. But anyway, there's so much. It was just fun, man. What a fun day. I got to sit down with my kids and watch those games, and to have them all on. I remember I just saw a post by Diego Bocanegra, our friend, and he had, I think, 5 TVs and iPads and everything else in his room. It was fantastic. And I just had the iPads and the TV. I didn't quite have the multiple televisions on mantles and stuff like he did. But
but he's next level though, Diego.
He's next level in everything he does, I think. So anyway, but we had a blast in our house anyway. So all right, so let's get to it. We got some episodes to cover, and we were as we were getting ready to start this episode, we'd mentioned this was just a really cool half season. I mean, coming off of the off-season talks, and we had pumped up this season as having some really cool guests. And May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and so we were able to get folks on there who were going to help us understand mental health, and all of them touched on it. Some were, that's all they talked about, really. But I just want to hear from you just generally over the last 4 episodes. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Phil, I feel like a broken record when we get on these, halftime talks, because I get so much out of these interviews. As a former college coach and now doing the consulting work that I'm doing with different clubs and coaches and things, there's just so much out there, so much more to continue to learn. And I just think some really fun programs and ideas that are being pushed around our country and the world. And I think these 4 guests that we have really dive deep into some really, really critical areas of sport. And I found them very, very interesting, each and every one of them. And I think I told you I'm going to go back to, probably every one of them at some point to just kind of dig in a little bit deeper and listen a little bit more intently to some of the things that they're saying and the references that they have to certain things. I think they can help me be a better leader and a better coach and consultant as I'm navigating the things that I'm doing now.
Yeah. I'm always blown away by our guests, because there's just so many people out there that are doing amazing things. Just a lot of, I mean, I have tons of fun doing these interviews just because I get to learn stuff. But I remember, actually, it's kind of the funny stories about all these guests. They're all referrals or people that I've met over the last 6 to 8 months. I mean, I none of these, oftentimes these guests are people I've known for years and years. And that's one of the things I love about where we've gotten to in this show as well, is that we're having people sending us guests. We're having people that are saying, hey, you should interview this person, you should interview that person. Daniel O'Neill, the doctor, the orthopedic surgeon who was the first guest of this season, he was a friend of, from a friend of mine who said, hey, I just heard this guy on another podcast, you got to get him on yours. It's exactly what you were talking about. And I mentioned that on that interview, that he had listened to the Demerit interview my friend had, and he listened to a different interview with Dr. O'Neill, and he said, oh, you gotta, it's like the same, they're talking about the same stuff, you got to get him on. And I'm so glad he did, because what a great conversation that was, just to be able to talk with him about the idea of physical identity. And I've talked about that with so many people over the last, ever since I learned about him. And and before we get into talking about that, I want to remind you folks out there, like, share with us these guests. Phil at howsoccerexplainsleadership.com. You can just send me an email and say, hey, there's somebody that I know would be a great guest. And even if it's you who you think would be able to share stuff with other people, we'd love to. We're here to share really good information with people to be able to understand how we can use, the lessons from this game and the lessons from other sports as well, to be able to help us in the different areas of our life. So that's just another plug for that. We do listen, we do respond to the emails, we do want to have these conversations with you. So going back to Dr. O'Neill, I mean, I know for me, just to hear about the impact of, when we talk about youth sports and how the very highly elite competitive sports in our country have changed and have caused specialization and all these other things that we've talked a lot about on this show. He brought a different angle on it. The idea that it also brings in the issue that when kids don't play the competitive sports now, they're really dubbed as non-athlete, which then leads to them, really not getting exercise and not being physically fit and physically active, because it's athlete, non-athlete distinction. It used to be non-athletes were, going out and still playing, riding their bikes around, climbing on trees, going to parks, hanging out, doing hikes, doing all these things. And now it seems like when you're a non-athlete, you're going and sitting on a screen and playing video games and, sitting at parks rather than playing at parks, that type stuff. I've seen it a little bit with just the high school kids. But what have you seen on that? I mean, do you you see that in Waco? Do you see that in the different, when kids stop playing the sports? Are you seeing that same thing?
Yeah, you do. And I really liked a lot of the things that Dr. O'Neill talked about, because I do think that we've got to push our education system to make sure that we're keeping physical fitness and keeping not sport, but just play. That there's times, there's so many studies, and he talks about it, the studies that talk about how academics are the more successful in academics when people are active, right? Even our own minds, like, hey, wake up, get your day going, get some exercise. Like, it's the same thing for kids. And I think because of specialization and because of the high emphasis on high athletic achievement, I think, and with the ongoing push for tech and the accessibility of tech for our kids, it's easy for kids not to do things. When we were younger and there wasn't as much tech, I mean, we're just going to sit in our room all day and do what? Look at our ceiling. We could, but we did, if we weren't doing that, we're doing something active. We were moving our bodies to do things. And I think that the push to get back into our education system, back into our schools, physical activity and physical education. And I've seen it in some local schools where, a PE class is they're just walking around a track. I mean, that's better than nothing, right? But how can we get our kids more active? How can we introduce them to things that that keep them active and keep them outside and keep them moving their bodies and teaching more about how to take care of themselves. So I think that's a really important thing that he's doing, is that fight for physical activity, even within in our school programs, and getting parents more involved in the importance of challenging our kids to just get out and play. You guys talked even on the thing about I think is it safetyism, how sometimes a lot of parents are scared about their kids going out and playing and doing things. And I find myself at times too having to check myself of what I think might be okay for my kids to do, and realize, okay, is that something really that I should be concerned about, or is that something that just kind of played into my head, and really shouldn't be much of a concern, you
Yeah.
know? But I enjoyed his conversation, and the conversation around specialization. That, that's a theme that has come up a lot in our conversations through many guests, that specialization thing. And I love, you had the conversation with him, but I think that the whole, conversation about specialization from his opinion was very interesting, because you were dancing very well through, like, hey, you're not saying that, high level sport is a bad thing, but, and you're not, take me through kind of your thought process as you're interviewing him through that conversation of specialization, because I thought it was very unique and great.
Yeah, well, his book, and I strongly recommend that book, Survival of the Fit, and it goes into a lot of these things, and it is a dance, and it is something that um I wanted to make sure that he was sharing his views on competitive sports, because he's very clear that for that 1%, kind of we were talking about in the Demerit interview, for that 1%, yeah, like go and do what you got to do. But the problem is we don't know who that no 1% is.
Yeah.
Early on. And we're coaching everyone as if they're that 1%, because we don't know who the 1% is, which makes sense from that side of it. Right. But as a parent, as a orthopedic surgeon, he's seeing the detrimental effects of coaching everyone to that 1%, when most people aren't the 1% necessarily. 99% of the people are not the 1%.
Good math
Right?
right there, Phil.
Exactly. I can do some math, like even this early in the morning, but so in the interview, I want to not lead him too much, because I know, I was a lawyer, so I know you don't want to lead people too much, especially when you know what they're going to say generally, unless you're cross-examining, which I'm not doing in these, just to make it clear. And yet, I didn't want him coming across as this guy, as he said, most of our audience are people who are going to be either coaching at high levels, playing at high levels, gonna be playing at high levels, wanting people to play at high levels. But most people listening to this are gonna have that competitive. So I didn't want them just writing him off as some whack job who hates competitive sports.
Yeah.
And I wanted people to make sure to really understand that because we're pouring so much into this, it's actually ruining a lot of the physical identity for these other kids, because as a society, we've said that, oh, if kids want to be active, we have all these youth sports that are out there. The problem is most of the kids are either burning out, they don't think they're good enough, and there's not a lot of options now. It used to be that there was recreational sports up until high school was done, where AYSO, rec soccer, and you could play at a decent level playing that. Now it's like everything is either club, competitive, or just nothing. I mean, there are those games, but I've reffed those games. I don't know if you've seen those games, Paul. It's painful.
Yeah.
It's like, it's literally parents who are saying, it's probably to their kids, you have to play something. You have to do something. You're not just going to sit around your butt. Good for those parents, like to be like, you got to be active. But the kids are out there and they just don't care.
Yeah.
And half the times you're showing up with 9 players because the girls are not even wanting to be out there. So, and I see it at the high school level too. So that's what I wanted to make sure with him. I was giving him the opportunity to share it, and making sure people didn't write him off as some wacko, because he's not at all. I mean, he's a guy who, I mean, not only is he an orthopedic surgeon who's just brilliant, obviously, if he's going to make it through and doing all that. He's got that book on knee surgery too, which I recommend. But he also is a guy who really loves sports. I mean, he does. He literally, I don't know if you saw it, but as I'm wrapping up that episode, if you watch the video, you'll see him literally walk by the video in a bike outfit, because he went straight from our interview to a big bike ride that he had with his people, because he's practicing what he's preaching, and he's a guy who really believes this, and he wants the people to continue playing sports at high level, but also his heart is for that 75% of people who stop playing sports before college, and to make sure that they don't just stop being active. So anyway, we could talk on and on about that, but that was that dance. That was that dance
Yeah.
from that,
Well,
which
that
is
was
fun.
good. Yeah, and I think, I mean, there may be a transition there, not skipping out of order. I don't think the order matters that we
Go
talk
for
about
it.
our guests, but I think there is a connection there even with Evan, who's
Mm-hmm.
the executive director of, the New Jersey Youth Soccer, which we can dive into that a little bit too. But I think there's a connection because he talks a little bit too in the women's game, how he's seeing a trend for women or girls not participating as much. So the numbers for participation for girls is starting to lessen. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
think we hit a height after the 99 World Cup, right? We kind of cruised so maybe it's a leveling off a bit, but I think there's a piece of it there too, where it went from there's an excitement about youth girls soccer to now it's specialization and it's, playing at a high level or you're not really going to play soccer anymore. And there's so many other things for people to do now that maybe that's why those numbers are diving. So I think those do relate a little bit with our guests. That maybe part of the problem with, maybe the drop a little bit or decline in the numbers for girls soccer has to do with the fact that we've really gone to the specialization on the girl side, from, where girls could play a couple of different sports. So now they're really special. If they want to go to college, and I'm putting my quote fingers up for those of you just listening to the audio, if they want to play college soccer, they have to specialize in soccer from the age of 10. It's not true. I don't
Mm-hmm.
believe in it. But maybe there's some correlation there between those two. And that's just one little bit of bitty minute thing that Evan talked about. But I think that's maybe a bit of a connect.
Yeah, I talk. You do too. I know, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. See if you agree. But a big part of my theory is when they specialize early, the parents are also investing massive amounts of money and time into it, right? So they're telling their kids, you're going to make it, you're going to be there. This is why we're doing it. We're pouring into you, we're investing in you so that you can be a college player, pro, whatever that next level is that they're trying to get to. You can be a comp player if they're just playing rec, when they're 8, 9. We're investing in you. We're getting you the private training. We're getting you the speed training. We're getting you the agility training. We're going to have put a parachute on your back and you're going to run. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Right. And I'm not saying that's bad. But it puts a lot of pressure on those kids. So
Yeah.
to do in the right, keep perspective and doing that is really difficult. It's tough to do that. And so there's this pressure, and then they get into these clubs, and necessarily if you're going to have 20 elite players at an ECNL club or MLS Next or whatever it is, it's a ton of pressure on these kids. And so this is pressure cooker, which we've talked about. Parents are also pressuring, but then also if that kid's not going to play all the time, which they won't, because
Yeah.
there's 20 kids on that elite team and all those are great players. Well, if you have 20, two have to sit out in any given tournament because you can only have 18 on the bench, right? So they're literally not even possibly playing in the game. So that causes a lot of, unless the coaches are dialed in to culture and understand themselves and understand their players, it leads to toxicity on those teams. When there's toxicity on those teams, you and I, we've talked a lot about this too. All of a sudden, it's just a recipe for burnout, right? Which then you go to, why are so many young women and men both? It's not just the girls' side that's burning out. Why are they all burning out? Well, because they're in these toxic, terrible environments that are getting them, and they're getting it from all sides. They're getting it from the parents, they're getting it from the coaches, and they're getting it from their teammates too. Like, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do the next thing. And man, they're just trying to figure out who they are, right? They're trying to figure out their identity. They're trying to figure out, what do I want to do next? And we're putting all this on them. And I just think it's too much, which it's no wonder that the amount of girls who are still playing in high school is dwindling, because they're also told, if you're not the best, then why even bother playing? Right. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's too much pressure on and these girls at a young age, or any player, men, women, whatever, too much pressure at a young age to do. And I think I've told the story before where I've had numerous players come to the collegiate level that have their first realization being away from mom and dad that they don't even really love soccer.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
I've been playing forever. It's like, hey, why do you play? Oh man, I've never really been asked that. So I think that's is definitely a thing. It's a trend that needs to change and go back the other way, for sure.
Yeah. So I love, like you said, I love what Evan's doing there. I love and you even talked about it before. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, is just as far as understanding what a state association actually does. Like, that was kind of
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, I found it really interesting, and obviously, I love the collaboration that the state associations have that he talked about with some of the different state associations collaborating on things, because we, as a leader, we need to share information. We need to share, especially if our goal is to benefit a certain population of people. So if we're trying to benefit young soccer players, then yes, those state associations should work together to share knowledge and share information. But it's amazing, and I've been part of youth sports most my entire life, and don't think that I really truly understood a lot of the things that go on between inside of a state association. And I think he talked about having a team of maybe 10 people. I think he
Yeah,
kind
I
of
think
threw
that was
that in
right.
there,
Yeah.
dealing with like 100,000 members or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing the things that they're doing and initiatives that they're pushing on
Yeah.
um, to support their community. And right, and he even mentions that every community is going to be a little bit different. Every state's going to be a little bit different in what their pursuit is and what their focus is going to be on. But I think it is important that they understand the needs of their community and are pouring into that. And it sounds like he's doing a fantastic job in the state of New Jersey. I just keep hearing a lot of great things coming out of the state of New Jersey, and I think that New Jersey's always kind of been ahead of the game when it came to
Mm-hmm.
youth soccer. They've always had. He talks about some of the players that come back or they're not players anymore, but former players that are coming back to pour into the community. Yeah, there's some big
Yeah.
names that
Yeah.
have come out of the state of New Jersey, men and women.
Yeah.
So I think they've always done it at an elite level, and I think he's doing a great job of keeping that going.
Yeah. It's funny when you think about New Jersey, because it's like Northeast, cold, like you don't think much about New Jersey as far as soccer. And then you remember that Tony Meola, Tab Ramos, Carly Lloyd. And Carly Lloyd's one that people think about all the time because she
Yeah,
is, is recent, but and with
most
social
recent. Yeah,
media age, but there's a lot of names that come out of there, and it's a great pool of great players, and it has been historically, and it probably will continue to be, and that's what's cool. So folks, if you didn't listen to that, go check out Evan Dabby, and he talks about the Growing the Girls Game initiative that they have. He talks about the Innovate to Grow initiative that David Rika, who was also on the podcast a few episodes back, is heading up there. They have their metro leagues. They have it's a lot of really cool stuff, as you said, Paul. 100,000 kids, about 5,000 coaches, I believe. It's just a huge operation. And Evan came from the MLS, and he's just bringing some amazing stuff to New Jersey youth soccer. And so, if you're in that area, you have a great guy at the helm. If you're not, I think you got a lot to learn from it. He talked about collaboration in that as well, as he's collaborating with other state associations on some, safety projects, on some other things, and hopefully we can start doing some more stuff with them collaboratively. So that was a great conversation. The other one that we got to talk with, it's a friend, another mutual friend of David Rika, who referred me to Cara Bradley, and all these. I think all but Daniel O'Neill are connected in this half season. But Cara, she talked about this gut brain connection, which was, it's fascinating to me, just how the brain works, how the body works, the miracle of the body, really, that it all works together and it's all interconnected. And man, you can't do one thing without it affecting 25 different things or more in your body. So what do you think of that interview?
It was fascinating. I think I mentioned to you before we started recording that, I've heard a bit about that gut brain connection and not enough to know anything, but her interview intrigued me to want to go in and learn more about it. And I think as she's talking and you start thinking through, your own decisions through what you eat and how you exercise, I started putting some pieces together in my own life. I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's why this, or that's why that, or whatever, so it does make a lot of sense when you start to navigate and put some pieces together. But I think she's just a wealth of knowledge and information, and extremely, extremely smart in the focus of what she's been doing and studying for a long. And I love her. And if for nothing else, go back and listen to the podcast just to hear her story and how she got to where she is. Was a very interesting road. I mean, nothing real crazy, but sometimes you wonder, how do people end up studying something so specific and so unique? And her road to get there is worth a listen just on its own.
Yeah.
But I do like that gut brain health idea. And I think that as I'm navigating probably a little bit more youth sport now and some, things like that, I think it's something that I'd like to know more about also, as we're navigating how to keep players healthy and injury free, and just longevity of player can be very beneficial.
Yeah. And you kind of alluded to it, but the great thing about that conversation is she talks a lot about optimal performance, right? And the idea of getting in the flow, as I joked about on that. And I hope it brought you back to NBA jams, like when you're in fuego, and you can't miss a shot. Like, how do you get there? How do you get to in fuego? Maybe not with literal fire flames on your back, but, or with the ball, you don't want to burn balls, but it's that idea of how do you get to that zone? We've all been there. And how can we recreate that moment and not just have it be a thing of chance? And so that's, that was what I just really enjoyed that conversation. And then the gut brain is part of that. The some of the other things that she talked about there. Again, with the just mental health, it doesn't just mean going and meditating, that may be part of it. Doesn't mean just doing breathing techniques, may be part of it. It doesn't mean just, getting, doing this other practice, yoga or stretching or whatever. It starts with what you eat, right? Not starts, but it's what you eat as well, right? That's part of it. If you don't eat well, your brain will not be optimally healthy and you won't be able to perform optimally. And that doesn't mean just drinking some protein shakes and, making sure your muscle mass is right. If you're not getting the right bacteria, your brain won't function at its highest capacity. And it is fascinating, it totally is. So that was another one. Any other thoughts on Cara?
No, I mean, there's some other interesting pieces in there that people should listen for with her, her inline skating or rollerblading career, and her, just some other interesting things. And I won't talk about it too much on here because I want to leave it for folks to navigate and find on their own within the interview. But she's an interesting listen for 1,000 different reasons.
Absolutely. There, I think they call them Easter eggs. Is that what they call them? Like those Easter eggs that you find in the videos or something out there. But anyway, that's what the kids talk about. Anyway, I don't know.
Gotcha. I'm not as hip as you, Phil.
Yeah, well, I'm not hip either because I'm asking you because you're a few years younger, so that's why I'm trying to see if you know. But
you have your children are a little bit older than mine. I think that's what keeps you connected.
That's true. Yeah. It's some sort of egg that you can find in these episodes. So go check them out. We'd love to hear your fun. They are fun. They're fun little nuggets that if I find that about someone, I'm going to ask them. So I was able to do that with Cara. And the last one we got to do together. What a fun thing that was, man. I just really enjoyed, and hopefully we'll get to do more of that where we're hopping on interviews together. You brought so much different to the table that I wouldn't have asked, and just your experience that you're able to bring. So hopefully everyone else enjoyed that too. But what would you take out of that with Brad? Just, I know we talked about it during the interview a little bit more than we normally, we not more, we were able to do that on that interview, but just looking back on it, I know I listened to it again. I don't know if you were able to after the interview, but what did you really just take away from that to give people a couple nuggets from that interview so they can go back and listen to it?
Yeah, I think, obviously Brad is a repeat interview. He's been on before, and I think the progress of soccer resilience from when you first interviewed him to when we got to interview him during this last season, it's always fun to keep up with our guests, and I think we'll probably do that with some others, I'm sure. But just the things that they're doing, and I've had since that first interview, I had the chance to speak with Brad while I was at Baylor, and we've kind of kept in touch. And I just find the work that they're doing with soccer resilience is so needed. right now, not just collegiately, but through youth soccer and college soccer, pro soccer. They're hitting all the levels. And the way the system that they've put together and the way they're going about doing it is also very practical. I've talked to many people over my career that are, selling the next thing or whatever, and it's just not practical to put into place. So I think not only what they're doing, but how they're doing it makes it very practical. And I think also we talk a little bit about trying to get rid of the stigma of needing a counselor or psychologist and the introduction of sports psychology and that sort of thing. But I think their goal to kind of eliminate the stigma of it and make it more of a daily practical thing that we navigate as humans, not just as athletes, but specifically athletes in this context, is a much needed thing, and especially as we're seeing everything, recently with the recent, suicides of student athletes that are becoming, gaining more and more national attention. These are some things these are resources that are very practical to use and very well done. And that's what I take away from what Brad's doing with soccer resilience, is just much needed and very practical ways of getting in with not just players, but players, coaches, and players, coaches, and parents.
Yeah.
Which are all, very unique situations within sport.
Definitely. Yeah, I always enjoy talking with Brad. He's just a good dude. He's just a really good dude, and he's a real deal. He's in it like we are, just to help people. He wants to help people to flourish, and I love it because he actually reached out to me again and was like, "Hey, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. I'd love to be able to, just share some different things." And I really enjoyed your conversation with him from a practical standpoint for coaches, and parents too, but mainly coaches. Just like, what's that interaction look like ideally, what's it look like, and what's the difference between a sports psychologist and a counselor, and when would you use one, and what does it look like, and how can we keep the confidentiality that makes it
Mm-hmm.
that's necessary when we're doing this stuff, because we need to make sure to protect that, and otherwise people aren't going to share a lot of stuff. And if there's something that the coach needs to know to be able to help that player flourish at the higher level, how can they share that in a way that's appropriate? What does that look like? And that tension, again, I think that's similar. We talk about tension in a lot of these different interviews, right? But that's the tough stuff. This stuff is nuanced, which is why I love being able to talk about it here. Is we can talk about it in kind of a neutral setting for people, where there's not a particular person in the frame, where there's all these different variables. We could talk about it in the abstract, and then the different variables obviously put in that context and see what it looks like. But I really appreciated how Brad really just laid it out and made it very clear. He does that very, very well. So I
He
just
does.
love talking with him about that, and
Yeah,
just really
and I would
enjoyed that interview.
encourage too. We talked a little bit about, being, you know, old school type of coaches that, maybe, the sports psychology thing is kind of a new thing, in some ways it's kind of a new thing. And there's, a lot of coaches that have an older mentality that they themselves don't know how to respond to or accept kind of how this is kind of moving forward and how needed it is. And I would just encourage any coaches that may be in that boat of, not really sure what this is or what it's about or if it's even necessary. I'd encourage you to listen to this podcast, because I think,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, Brad does a really good job of putting some of those things into perspective for us as we're in. Because I even admit that, early in my coaching career, I wasn't so sure about all of it either. But I think when you adopt it and you realize how important it is, it can really benefit not only yourself, but your players and your
Yeah,
program.
absolutely. Absolutely, man. Well, hey, so I mean, I hope you're gonna. Did you enjoy that? Are you like a one and done? Or are you like saying I'm gonna do more of the interviews?
No,
What do you
man, let's
think?
do some more. That
Okay,
was fun.
all
Yeah,
right.
I
Just
enjoyed
making
that.
sure. I
I
didn't.
mean, no, it's I really enjoyed, those conversations. And I think one thing I enjoyed about it is, you and I are similar in a lot of ways, but our perspective and experience within the game is very different. So I think we
Hmm.
were able to ask some different directed questions that, especially with Brad's interview, that was, I think,
Yeah,
hopefully helpful for a wide variety of listeners that we have on the podcast.
I hope so too. I think it was. I think so. I agree with that. Exactly what you just said. So yeah, no, I figured as much. I figured I just didn't want to make assumptions. I just didn't want to make assumptions there. So no, I absolutely loved it, and I think that everyone out there did as well. So hopefully we can do more interviews with the two of us being able to do it. And you can do some interviews with yourself with people other than your wife. So that will be good too.
Maybe,
So
maybe we'll see about that.
we'll see. I don't know. I'm just aspirations, you know.
Yeah.
But all right. So as we close up another halftime show, what are your just kind of just what are you thinking, man? What are you thinking about this half season? What are you thinking about moving forward? What are you thinking about just what excites you about what's going on right now?
Well, I think we're in a really cool place with this podcast. First of all, I mean, you announced earlier this week 20,000 downloads, and obviously we're making an impact, which is why we're doing this. We're doing it to help people and help help others. And I'm just what I get excited about during this halftime is what's next. What's next? What's coming in the next half season here? What are we going to be bringing to the table for these folks and for ourselves selfishly, right? Because we're helping others and helping ourselves
Yeah.
through this process. But I think it's very important that we sit back and look at this past month, being mental health awareness month, and how important it is that we not just kind of get through this month and then kind of forget about it. I think it's important that we're navigating not only for ourselves as leaders and coaches, because we have to take care of ourselves first, and then once we're able to do that, we can help our athletes as well. So I don't want to look past what this month was all about. And I thought you did a good job of putting together 4 episodes that really dove into what can make us better as leaders through those avenues.
Well, I am looking forward to the next half as well. There are some great interviews coming your way. We're actually working on a couple to finish off the half. We have 2 coming. One is a very different. I'm not even going to say what it is, but it's just a
Teaser.
different. It's a different interview with it's actually two men I talk with. One is a soccer guy, the other is not, and he's very different from what you'd expect on a soccer podcast, which
Great.
goes back to we're all about leadership here, and if we can learn from other sports, other disciplines. I'll give you a hint. It's related to a sport we've talked about a few times, and actually have a couple recommendations about on this show already. So that just gives you a little teaser there. And then the other one is actually another mental health conversation with Shay Hadow. She's a great woman who's doing some cool things. So we're going to talk with her as well. And and so I also just want to remind you folks, we got Coaching the Bigger Game that is now out there. You're able to sign up for that if you want to do that. coachingthebiggergame.com. Again, that's to help lead yourself, lead your individual players, and lead your team with excellence. And Paul has warriorwaysoccer.com, where you can find everything you want to know about Warrior Way. Warrior Way Gives, Warrior Way Consulting. Some really cool stuff going on there. Paul just got back from Spain doing some cool stuff. So we'll probably talk about that in the future, what's coming down the pike for him and with that organization. So with all of that, folks, I hope that you are taking what you're learning from this show and you're using it to help you be a better leader in every way, a better spouse, a better parent, a better friend in your community. And you're continually reminding yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great week.